I am Elias Hawthorne. That year, I had just turned 9, a frail child in the village of Blackwood Hollow, where a permanent, thick fog forever drifted over the cobbled lanes and the dense woods that surrounded it. They said the fog came from the marshes to the east, where the waterlogged earth gave off the rank stink of rotting moss and the white bones buried since the previous century. It was the autumn of 1919, when the World War had ended and the country still trembled after the Spanish flu. My father died in that plague, leaving us, my mother, Mrs. Eleanor, my little sister Amelia, and me, to find shelter. Mother could not bear to stay in the city and brought us back to Blackwood Hollow to live in an old wooden house that had been abandoned for many years. The house sat alone on a winding dirt road, its wooden walls blackened, its roof tiles rotten and moss-covered. When I stepped inside, I felt as if I had trespassed into a forgotten tomb. The air in the house was thick with the smell of soot and mildew, so heavy my chest tightened. Tall windows with cracked wooden frames let the wind howl in, making the curtains flutter like breath. I hated the place immediately, but Mother forced a smile and said, this would be a new beginning, a place for us to forget our loss. I nodded, but in my gut, I knew the house did not want us there. On the first night, I slept on a rickety bed placed by the window. The wind blew, branches scraped the glass, knocking like fingernails. I tossed and turned. In the dim light of a candle, I noticed a dark shape standing in the corner of the room, right beside the old toy chest we had hauled up from the cellar. At first, I thought it was a pile of clothes thrown there, but the shadow did not move with the candlelight. It stood still, tall and motionless, as if waiting for me. I blinked and it vanished, but the cold remained. The chill crept straight into my bones, accompanied by a faint, rank smell like newly turned earth from a graveyard. I pulled the blanket over my head, closed my eyes, and told myself that morning everything would be different. The next morning, the chest was flung wide open. Toys lay scattered across the floor, a teddy torn to rags, a few toy soldiers strewn about as if someone had kicked them. I knew for certain I had closed the lid the night before, but Mother said perhaps mice or feral cats. There were no cats in the house, but I kept silent. Only Amelia looked at me, her eyes wide with worry. That afternoon, she sat by the window and whispered, "Elias, there is a man in the wardrobe." He called my name. I laughed, thinking it a 6-year-old's fancy. But the smile died when she continued in a trembling voice. "His voice is very hoarse, like dry leaves. He said he would be friends with me." Amelia called him the Whisperer. The Whisperer. From that day, the name clung to the house like a ghost that would not leave. I began to hear strange sounds at night. At first, it was only the creak of the floorboards. Then the noises became clearer. The sound of heavy dragging, like nails being scraped down wood. Once I jumped up and looked at the floor and saw long grooves gouged deep, each scratch a dark red as if congealed blood. I sank to my knees and touched it. It was wet, viscous. The pungent metallic smell hit my nose and made me retch. I looked up, trembling, and then I heard the whisper. It came from inside the wardrobe. My name. Elias. The voice was hoarse, wasted, as if issued from the throat of one long dead. I sprang up and ran to Mother's room. She held me, patted my back, and said it was only a nightmare. But Amelia sat by her bed, pale, tears welling, shaking her head. It wasn't a dream. He stood by my bed. He smiled. From then on, the nights in that house became a long, dreadful vigil. I curled up, staring at the corner of the room, hoping it would be empty. But the Whisperer did not vanish. It It seemed he took more pleasure knowing I recognized his presence. Sometimes I heard a hissing laugh beyond the wall. Sometimes the wind would turn into a continuous stream of whispers so fast I could not make out the meaning, only feel my heart hammering. One night, Amelia screamed. I rushed to her room. The wardrobe door had burst open and I caught sight of him. A figure so tall its head nearly touched the doorframe, long, lanky shoulders, a gaunt body. The face was not a human face, but a warped mask of bone. The eye sockets were hollow, yet from them glowed a red, like burning embers. He did not step forward, only stood there, staring. I froze. A cold gust blew down the back of my neck as if someone were breathing there. I turned and there was nothing. When I looked back at the wardrobe, he had vanished. Only Amelia remained, clutching at her chest, trembling and crying. He wants me to go with him, I told Mother. Mrs. Eleanor went pale and listened in silence. That night, when my sister and I curled up by her bed, she sighed softly. I have seen him too. He stood at my door, whispering about sins, the sins of the Hawthorne family. Then she told a grim story, that our ancestors, back in the 17th century, had betrayed the villagers in a mysterious execution, causing many to die unjustly. Some said the family was cursed. I listened with my heart pounding, feeling the fog outside seep through every crack, swallowing us whole. Mother prayed. She placed candles in every room and read from the Bible with a quavering voice. But the moment the prayer sounded, the house shuddered, the wooden walls cracked, and a choking, hoarse burst of laughter echoed from within. The candles went out. Black smoke rose. I clung to Amelia, feeling the cold tighten around us like an invisible hand. The climax came in the winter of 1920. A blizzard covered Blackwood Hollow, the sky pitch black, wind whistling through every slat. I lay curled in my covers when I heard a hinge squeal slowly. The bedroom door opened a crack. The hallway was pitch dark. The oil lamp Mother usually left burning had gone out. In the blackness, a figure leaned in, tall and spindly, eyes red and flickering. He stepped forward, each step dragging. The floorboards moaned under invisible feet. I shook so violently I could not cry out. As he lunged, two long arms reached out, bony fingers clawing at the air, ready to drag me down into some unseen pit. I screamed. Mother burst in, the lamp blazing in her hand. In an instant, he dissolved into a thin smoke and melted into the wall. But Amelia was gone. We tore the room apart. Finally, we opened the wardrobe and found her curled up inside, eyes wide and empty, murmuring. The whisperer said I would be his friend. After that, none of us slept. Mother quietly packed our things and decided to leave the place. She said if we did not go, the whole family would die. On the last day, as we stepped out into the yard, I looked back. In the gray, suffocating fog, at the second-floor window, a tall, lanky silhouette appeared. He did not move, but I knew he was watching. Cold slid straight into my ear, and I heard the whisper. Clear. So close, I thought he stood right beside me. We will meet again, Elias. I froze, my heart seeming to stop. When I blinked, the figure had gone. But I knew. He had never left. After what happened in the old house, my mother could not bear it any longer. Mrs. Eleanor hurriedly sold that house, gathered all her savings, and remarried a man who had once served as a military doctor during the war. His name was Victor Langford, tall, with deep-set eyes that always held a weary look. People said he brought back from the battlefields of Europe not only scars on his flesh, but scars in his mind. He seemed composed, sometimes cold. But I noticed in his gestures a very slight trembling, as if someone were forever chasing him in his dreams. Mr. Victor took us to a larger mansion in the center of Blackwood Hollow. The house had once belonged to a wealthy family who had all died in the flu last year. From the outside, it looked sturdy. Stone walls covered in moss, tall wooden-framed windows. But the first time I set foot inside, I felt it was little different from a great corpse. Splendid on the outside, hollow within. Long, yawning corridors, cold tile floors, and a peculiar, pungent scent hung in the air, like lilies placed on a grave. After that, none of us slept. Mother quietly packed our things and decided to leave the place. She said if we did not go, the whole family would die. On the last day, as we stepped out into the yard, I looked back. In the gray, suffocating fog, at the second-floor window, a tall, lanky silhouette appeared. He did not move, but I knew he was watching. Cold slid straight into my ear, and I heard the whisper. Clear. So close I thought he stood right beside me. "We will meet again, Elias." I froze, my heart seeming to stop. When I blinked, the figure had gone. But I knew. He had never left. After what happened in the old house, my mother could not bear it any longer. Mrs. Eleanor hurriedly sold that house, gathered all her savings, and remarried a man who had once served as a military doctor during the war. His name was Victor Langford, tall, with deep-set eyes that always held a weary look. People said he brought back from the battlefields of Europe not only scars on his flesh, but scars in his mind. He seemed composed, sometimes cold, but I noticed in his gestures a very slight trembling, as if someone were forever chasing him in his dreams. Mr. Victor took us to a larger mansion in the center of Blackwood Hollow. The house had once belonged to a wealthy family who had all died in the flu last year. From the outside, it looked sturdy. Stone walls covered in moss, tall wooden-framed windows. But the first time I set foot inside, I felt it was little different from a great corpse. Splendid on the outside, hollow within. Long, yawning corridors, cold tile floors, and a peculiar, pungent scent hung in the air, like lilies placed on a grave. My room was on the second floor, the window looking out over the foggy woods. Inside there was a deep, cavernous wardrobe, reaching up to the ceiling. The first day I unpacked, when I opened the wardrobe door, a smell of mildew burst out, mixed with the rot of decaying cloth. Old hangers dangled like half-hung necks. I felt a chill run down my spine, slammed it shut, and told myself it was only lingering traces of the old house haunting my imagination. But I was wrong. On the first night, when the wind screamed through the trees, I heard rustling in the wardrobe. At first it was small, like mice scurrying. But it grew clearer. The wardrobe door trembled, the hinges clicked. I pulled the blanket over my head and tried to keep my eyes shut. Then there was a knock. 3 knocks, slow and steady, coming from the window right beside my bed. I peered out. Outside was the second floor, no balcony, no walkway at all. Yet pressed up against the glass was a hand. Skin as white and waxen as candle wax. Long, gaunt fingers, nails blackened. It rested there, then slid down, leaving a long smear of dark blood. I screamed and leapt out of bed. Mother and Mr. Victor rushed in. The window was bare. Only a faint, damp stain remained. I pointed, trembling. Mr. Victor frowned and sighed. War trauma makes many people prone to hallucinations. Perhaps it has spread to this boy. Then he waved his hand and told me to go back to sleep. But I saw the hand clearly. It was no illusion. A few weeks later, my little brother Theodore, only 4 then, began waking in the night, crying, He whispered, "She sits by my bed. She wears a white dress. Her eyes are pitch black. She tells us we must stay here." I goose-pimpled. Theodore had never known about the whisperer, but the terror in his voice was the same as Amelia's had been years before. The name she first spoke through Theodore was Lady in Ivory, the woman in white. From then on, I dreamed the same dream every night. I stood in the cold room. The wardrobe door was ajar, and out of the darkness stepped a tall woman. A long white dress swept the floor, filthy as if dragged through mud. Black hair hung over her face. I could not make out skin, only two deep black hollows where her eyes should be. She drifted without touching the floor, whispering my name. Elias. The sound was hollow and dry, like wind through a tomb slit. At first, I thought it only dream delirium. But one night, I woke and found her truly there. Not in a dream. She stood at the foot of my bed, so tall her head nearly touched the ceiling, her dress moving though there was no wind. I held my breath, frozen. She leaned slowly toward me, hair brushing her shoulders, and the black hollows of her eyes came into sharp relief. Cold emanated from her. The stench of decay hit my lungs. I wanted to scream, but the sound was caught in my throat. Only when her hand reached out, her icy fingers passing an inch from my face, did I burst into tears and call for Mother. The lamp in the room flared on. She vanished, leaving only the window rattling. Mother held me and soothed me, but I could still see the purple bruise on my hand, where it seemed someone had gripped me. I told Mr. Victor. He said sternly, "Do not feed Theodore with such fanciful stories. He is far too young." But that night, I heard him awake very late, walking the corridor with an oil lamp burning. Perhaps he did not believe me, but he feared his own dreams. Lady in Ivory grew more manifest by the day. Once, while I studied by the oil lamp, a white mist formed at the window, and then the familiar hand pressed against the glass. I dashed into the hallway and nearly fell over my own shadow. When Mr. Victor came running, there was nothing but a faint, damp mark. He looked at me for a long time, an expression of unease crossing his face. I saw him begin to carry a pistol at his hip, as he had in the war. The climax came on a stormy night in 1922. Thunder crashed, and the wind lashed the windows. I woke with a start at the sound of a hinge shrieking. The window flew open, rain driven in, the chill stabbing. In a flash of lightning, I saw Lady in Ivory crawling through the frame, her white dress sodden, black hair matted. She slid inside as if weightless, skimming the ceiling before settling beside my bed. She bent over me, her black, hollow eyes boring into mine, and whispered, "Hawthorne, your bloodline belongs to us." Her breath was dry, the reek of death mixed with briny salt, pungent as a corpse buried in the mud. I screamed. Mother and Mr. Victor burst in, but by the time they reached the room, the window had slammed shut. I fainted. When I came to, deep scratch marks were clearly visible on my chest, arranged into a pattern resembling an ancient character. I could not fathom the meaning, but it felt like a mark, an assertion that I had been branded. After that, Theodore stopped speaking of her. He fell silent, his eyes forever avoiding the wardrobe. I knew he still saw her, but he was too terrified to speak. I too kept my mouth shut, but every night I felt cold breath by my ear. Lady in Ivory did not leave. She waited with patient malice. The years that followed were warped and misshapen. By day the house seemed ordinary. By night I heard floating footsteps in the corridor, the rustle of a dress across tile, and the sharp scent of lilies swept in on the wind. Once I saw her standing beyond the village graveyard, a tall white figure looming, watching me from afar. I tried to tell myself it was a hallucination, but deep down I knew. Lady in Ivory was not merely a wandering spirit. She was part of something vaster, older. I remember finding an old handwritten account in the village library about the massacre of 1692, from the time our Hawthorne ancestors lived here. The record was blurred, but I read a passage about a woman in a white dress, betrayed, sacrificed. I shuddered. Perhaps Lady in Ivory was a fragment of a curse passed down from that century, a thing that had turned the Whisperer into the captor of my sister, and that now marked me. For 3 more years we lived in that house. No one spoke of Lady in Ivory, but I knew she remained. Whenever the wind howled, I heard her whisper in the night. Sometimes, in the mirror, a white shape would flit behind me. And whenever I entered Theodore's room, I found him trembling in sleep, lips moving in indistinct murmurs. To escape the obsession, I often rode my bicycle around the village. The cobbled road was wet, trees rustling on either side. I tried to find peace in the turning of the wheels, but deep inside, I knew I was no longer free. Both the Whisperer and Lady in Ivory had latched onto me, like 2 shadows that would not let go. And it was during those roaming rides that I met someone new. An old man in a hat standing at the end of the road, driving. A man whom I later came to understand was no different from those other entities. Summer of 1923, I turned 13. The hauntings of the Whisperer and Lady in Ivory had never truly left me, but I had begun to search for ways to escape. I spent hours riding my bicycle along the cobbled lanes of the village, the new red bike Mother had bought me, a way of telling myself I was still just a normal boy. The wheels clattered on stone, the wind roared in my ears, and for a while, I could forget the whispers in the dark. And then I met him. At the end of a road, shaded by old maples, stood an ancient house. A long gravel drive led up to a weathered wooden door, and every time I passed, there he was. A tall, thin man in a gray overcoat, a battered fedora on his head. He never stepped beyond the gravel, only stood at the end of the drive, smiling, raising his hand in greeting. The first time, I merely nodded back, thinking him a kindly neighbor. But then it was every day, every time I rode past. Not chance, not coincidence. As though he knew the exact moment I would appear. One afternoon, I stopped my bike. He tilted his head and smiled, a strange, crooked smile, but his voice was warm and deep. "Good day, Elias. Fine new bicycle you've got there. Red, isn't it? Like the cloth your mother uses to polish the windows." I froze. I had never spoken to him before, nor had anyone told him such details. I stammered. You know my name?" He chuckled softly, tipping his hat. "I know many things, Elias. I know your little brother loves his wooden train. I know you often read secretly by candlelight when your mother sleeps. I even know the joke about the crow you told Amelia." Cold prickled my spine. That was something only Amelia and I had shared years ago in the old house. No one else knew. I edged back, ready to pedal away. He lifted a hand. "Don't be afraid. I only want to talk. It's lonely here. Few ever pass by. You remind me of my son." His voice was laden with sorrow, and for a moment I almost believed he was flesh and blood. I gave a timid nod, then rode off. But when I looked back, he was still there, motionless, eyes fixed on me. In the days that followed, I spoke with him again, briefly. A few words about school, about the bicycle, about the weather. He asked much. I answered little. Yet always he seemed to know more than he should, and in his voice was something unnatural, a rhythm slow and echoing, like a sound from deep underground. Then one day he was gone. I passed the house and saw no figure waiting. Curiosity drew me to cross the road. The iron gate, rusted, stood ajar. In the garden, an old woman was pulling weeds. I greeted her politely and asked, "Excuse me, ma'am. Your husband, is he well?" The woman looked up. She was aged, hair silver, eyes sunken. She studied me for a long time, then shook her head. "You must mean Harold. He's gone. Passed last year, the flu." I froze. "No. But I've seen him. He wears a hat. He stands at the end of the drive." She was silent for a while, then trembling, went into the house and returned with a photograph. In it was a man in an overcoat and fedora, the very face I had seen. But a long scar marred his left cheek. I shook my head. The man I met. He didn't have this scar. She clutched the frame and whispered, "Harold always wore his hat outside. But he never stood there after death. Never." She looked at me, her cloudy eyes glistening, then turned and disappeared inside, leaving me alone in the overgrown garden. That night, heavy rain fell. As I lay in bed, I heard knocking at the window. 3 knocks, slow, steady. My heart raced. In the rain outside, a man in a hat stood motionless. Water streamed from his coat. I backed away, shaking. Then his voice came. Not loud, only a whisper, but clear as if right beside my ear. "Elias, come out. Race me. Come out." I screamed for Mother. She and Mr. Victor rushed in, but when they shone the lamp at the window, there was no one but storm and rain. Mr. Victor sighed, called it a nightmare, and went to search the grounds with a torch. He found nothing, but I knew that voice was no wind. From that night on, I no longer saw the man in the hat by day, only the whisper in the dark, sometimes calling my name from the garden. And I began to recognize a dreadful familiarity in his cadence. It was like the whisperer, like Lady in Ivory, as though all 3 were the same. In 1924, I stumbled upon an old manuscript in an abandoned church. It told of the massacre of 1692, when the Hawthorne ancestors betrayed a band of villagers, handing them to the church in exchange for land. Among them was a woman in white, a man in a hat, and a prisoner bound in a dark cupboard, breathing only whispers. They were burned, buried alive, forgotten. But the curse endured, the curse that no child of Hawthorne would ever escape. I realized then that what I had seen were not 3 separate spirits. They were faces of the same thing, an ancient shadow that devoured all it touched and now clung to our bloodline. In 1925, we left Blackwood Hollow. Mother begged Mr. Victor to take us away, hoping distance would break the invisible chain. But as the carriage rolled from the gravel road, I looked back. In the choking fog, I saw all 3. The whisperer behind a window frame, Lady in Ivory hovering on the steps, the man in the hat at the end of the drive. They did not move, only stared at me, whispering as one, the sound like wind from a pit. "We will meet again, Elias." I turned away sharply, my heart pounding. But that whisper has never left me, even now, grown and living elsewhere. Sometimes I still hear 3 knocks on the glass, still see a white hand pressed to the window in stormy nights, and in the blurred morning mirror, a tall man in a hat standing behind me. I know I cannot escape. No Hawthorne can escape. Blackwood Hollow has never released us, and I am still waiting for the day they return to claim their blood debt